Hey guys, so this week we're going to be taking a look at character run cycles. If you haven't watched the walk cycle video, I highly suggest watching that first because there's going to be a lot there that's covered here that's going to overlap with this video. Be sure to stick through to the end of this video because I'm going to be breaking down some really great examples from Sakuga animation. So with that out of the way, let's start talking about animating run cycles. The process for these animations is the same as the walk cycle video. I'm going to start out with a loose, rough pencil, then go to a tighter line that has more of the shapes of the character, and then finally I ink over those lines and add in my color. Just as we saw with our walk cycle video, our character's arms and legs are going to be swinging in an arc that pivots around the shoulder and the hip. If you track the movement of the elbow and the knee at each frame, you can see that it follows an arced path. And that maintains the length at all points in the sequence. Otherwise, you'd be shortening the limb each time. Another way you can think about each limb is sort of like a pendulum that's swinging back and forth. Spacing is also a crucial component of fluid animation. And again, by spacing, I'm referring to the frequency of frames along an arc. With the run cycle, you can get away with even spacing, but I like to let the arms linger a little bit longer at the end of their swing, and then accelerate faster towards the other side. So you'll notice that there's more frames towards the end of that arc and fewer frames in the center. Another way to refer to this is favoring or easing into a pose. And what you'll notice is at the extreme ends of that arm swing, the arm is almost in the exact same position 2 frames in a row. This helps to accentuate a particular pose and also improves that sense of acceleration towards the center. Alright, now that we've discussed some of those underlying animation principles, I want to jump into the key poses of the run cycle. Just like the walk cycle, our running animation will be punctuated by 2 contact poses where that front leg sticks out and makes contact with the ground. For the run cycle we'll be doing, these contact poses will happen every 8 frames. But if you wanted your character to run faster, you could do a 6-frame cycle. Halfway between our contacts is our passing pose. Here the front leg is now directly underneath the body, and that back leg is halfway through its swing. Subdividing this even further, we have our down and up poses. In our down pose, that contacting foot makes full contact with the ground, and that leg bends a little bit, bringing the head level down. With the back foot, I tend to favor its position closer to the initial contact pose, again getting that acceleration we were talking about earlier. With the up pose, that right leg is now behind the body, stepping up on its tiptoes. With the knee still bent, the left leg has now swung all the way in front of the body. Now in real life, there's actually a pose between the up and contact where both feet are off the ground, but I noticed that in a lot of Sakuga animation that they tended to just skip this over and go directly from the up pose to the following contact. And when you play all of those poses in sequence, it makes this 8-frame run cycle. Let's have a look at the close-up run cycle that I did so we can discuss some of the 3D forms of the body. So in this first contact pose, you'll notice that the torso is tilted towards the camera, with the pelvis tilted in the opposite direction. And by doing this, it exaggerates the intensity of the run cycle, and really allows those forms to sort of rotate around each other. It's always important to know your ellipses and have a strong sense of volume, especially if you want to animate in perspective like this. If you're just finding this channel for the first time, I've got a ton of videos on perspective, so be sure to look at those and get a good sense of how you can rotate cylinders and other forms. With the contact on the far side, now the torso is tilting away from the camera, and the pelvis is slightly angled towards us. So just notice that they keep moving in opposition to one another. In the passing pose, both the torso and the pelvis are directly facing forward and are in line with each other. Now let's have a look at some run cycles that are done by animators that are way better than me. It's always a really good idea to study from masters and get a sense of what they're doing with their work. So this first run cycle is from Little Witch Academia, and I picked it because it was super exaggerated in terms of its key poses. This is a 6-frame run cycle done on 2s, so it's a total of 3 drawings for the entire run cycle. Off the bat, we can see that the torso is completely horizontal with the ground, so that's already super interesting. And the leg closest to us is above the body, so it's a super dynamic contact pose. Since it's only 6 frames, the down and passing pose are combined into one. And we can see a few things about this pose. The body has lowered significantly in the frame. Both the arms and legs are halfway through their arc. And the arms are kind of angled outward, which I like. And also she's managed to keep her torso completely horizontal. Now look how high up in the frame she is for this up pose. You can see that there's so much movement in this run cycle. You can see all the things we were talking about in the up pose earlier, except obviously some stylistic choices like maintaining the torso being horizontal. And in this case, that front arm is favoring or easing into that next pose. And now we have contact on the opposite foot. The next run cycle I want to look at is from Kill la Kill, because it's a great example of a character growing in the frame as they run towards the camera. All of this is hand-drawn, so they're using their knowledge of perspective to scale up the character as she runs towards the camera. But also you'll notice they take some liberties and really play around with proportions. Just like in the last one, it's a 6-frame run cycle, so we have a contact, a down/passing pose, and then an up pose. You can see already between that first contact and down pose that she's already grown a lot in the frame. In the following contact pose, you'll see that she gets much closer to the camera, and now we're starting to see her in a side view. It can be a little tricky to figure out the perspective, but you can see that there wasn't that much of a transition between the last pose and this one. It kind of just jumped immediately. Again, we'll see the same thing where there's not much transition here as she's getting much closer. But now we're getting that dilation in scale, right? The arm is getting much bigger, almost as if we're seeing her with a fisheye lens. Now she's right up in the camera, so all we're really seeing is her face. This is where it starts to get a little out of hand, and it's kind of awesome just how much they break the rules and exaggerate the sense of scale and proportion. Another thing you can notice is that even though she's right up in the camera, they're still keeping that contact down up pose sequence. I'm sort of guessing that this one's a contact. I can't really tell. But yeah, you can just see how crazy the perspective is going to start getting. And it's really cool the way they start to exaggerate the proportions here. And of course, it wouldn't be anime if there wasn't some pervy upshot. I don't necessarily suggest doing that with your run cycle, but at least the perspective is super cool. Yeah, and this shot's crazy. You can see just how huge the foot is in comparison. All right, everybody, that's about it for this video. Thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed it, be sure to click that like and notification bell. And if you want to see some of the real-time process footage of me making those animations, you can head over to my Gumroad at gumroad.com/moderndayjames or sign up on Patreon at patreon.com/moderndayjames.